Good morning and welcome in. This is 5 Clubs on Golf Channel.
You are a vital part of our game.
Thank you for having me on.
All the way to the green. Woo! Boy, was that fun.
I've always wanted to be on 5 Clubs. Thanks, Gary.
Good morning. Welcome into 5 Clubs. Great to have you with us. A Tuesday edition. Live on Golf Channel, also PGA Tour Radio, Channel 92 on Sirius XM. Gary Williams here. Century, always here, our presenting sponsor. When it comes to investing in golf, not only are we proud to have them right here, but with the USGA, with the first tee in the PGA Tour, they invest in golf and they want to invest in your business insurance. It's what they do. Century Insurance. A hell of a hullabaloo last night at the Hive. I mean, we don't get a lot when it comes to Charlotte sports. Hornets on a run, and then there's a Donnybrook on the floor last night. So we're trying to get our bearings here in this city. But we got a lot to get to on this Tuesday. Brendon Porath going to be with us. It's a fried egg Tuesday. Not only Brendon Porath, but Kevin von Valkenburg as well. So both those guys separately to get their thoughts on a number of things. Those guys, the whole team, you know how I feel about the stuff that they spend time delivering to a lot of people, not only their podcast, but also the written word, their profiles, their features, all of it. It's a Fried Egg Tuesday here. Last night, after having Luke Clanton on the show, I watched a little TGL. Great to see Emma Carpenter, member of the 5 Clubs team. I know she's doing some work for the Bay Club. She was there behind Marty Smith when he was conducting a little interview. But last night, the kids. And here's the thing about TGL. In addition to it being showmanship, it's a TV show. First of all, let me say this about Tony Finau. He is swagged out. He's now a Jordan Brand athlete. Now, I don't know if that's really good or if it's really bad. And I actually think if it's really bad, it makes it better. But Tony, with that full button short sleeve shirt, kind of like cruise wear, I thought it was stylish. Look at that hold off iron by our guest yesterday, Luke Clanton, hitting it there just right of the hole to about 5-6 feet. But the highlight of the night, in addition to, I thought, what was a great makeup of the Bay Club for last night, was this shot by Neil Shipley. It was, I think, 2 weeks ago that Justin Rose, who's going to be on this show tomorrow, made the albatross. Here's Neil Shipley pulling the string and unleashes. Now we have a pig pile. And Luke Clanton's looking for a piggyback ride, which was one of the great joys of life when you were around an uncle who was a mountain of a man to get a piggyback ride. Neil Shipley is a big boy. I thought that Minwoo Lee, Luke Clanton, and Neil Shipley, just the optics of those 3 young guys. It's like watching 3 college guys going to a simulator facility or just that and just having fun. So in addition, they won. So that was the little golf highlight from Monday night. So one of the things that happened toward the latter part of last week, and I'm going to get Brendon Porath and Kevin von Valkenburg's position on this, because I think this conversation it's simmered, it's festered, it's hung around elite professional golf on the men's side for a long, long time. I actually think the conversation has been misdirected, and I think it's been started completely wrong over and over and over again. But if anybody was watching golf last week, toward the latter part of the week, the PGA Tour did something very specific, very strategic, and the placement down to that was exactly what they wanted. Heading into a Super Bowl weekend, and it's not inappropriate from a timing standpoint that they are starting to put out commercial spots promoting the Players' Championship, their biggest event, one of the great events in all of golf. And at the end, the tag was, March is going to be major. The last word is it. The last word is the chum. Now, what's interesting is that the idea of the Players as a major has been going on for quite some time because of how great the event is. And it's not because the other four, and I'm not going to get bogged down in all that. We have plenty of time, and I think a thorough examination on the evolution, the history, because this has not been linear when it comes to how we got to where we've been for quite some time. It's murky. It's kind of clumsy. It's downright kind of, well, when did that happen? There is no clear line of distinction for the ones that are. But what happened was when the chum was put in the water, somebody reacted. Now, naturally, when you put chum in the water, it's with the idea that you're going to lure the shark and then you're going to put him in the boat. Well, it leads to one of the great cinematic lines of all time. You're going to need a bigger boat. Well, this guy is one of the great sharks, not just in golf media, and I mean that in the best way, in all of sports media. Brandel Chamblee's reaction to this is what really has driven this to the point now where it's going to continue. And I don't think by any measure the PGA Tour thought he was going to react this way, but here's what he had to say. And he said a lot more, not only at this moment, but since. The Players, to me, stands alone and above the other four major championships. It's not just a major. It is, in my estimation, the best major. So here is Brandel Chamblee, who, let me say this about a lot of people who may differ with him on his opinions. Of course, it's not a question of valuing him because you disagree with him. I think he actually has more value because many people do. But the difference between him and the dime store hot take artist is that, you know what? He's not a two-bit carny. This is not somebody who puts flimsy, frivolous positions out into the ether that is not supported by anything, which dime store, hot take artists, that's their bit. He's not that way because he spends an ample amount of time not only researching, gathering historical data and references, and contextualizing conversations. And that's why he is the reason, more so than anybody else. And if you want to disagree that there's somebody else in golf media that can drive something as much as him, I'd love to know who it is, because I don't think there's anybody or anybody that's close. So what happened when this commercial spot was put out, I think, like most people, the chum was devoured in a way to defeat the purpose of the chum. But because Brandel took the position of not only being in support that it is a major, but that in his estimation, it's the best major, in a weird way, he's now driving the boat. He's driving the boat for what the PGA Tour wants. And this, and again, the idea of it is or it isn't, look, it's not. It's not right now. I'm not saying it can't be, because again, how we got to where we are from 1860 to 1895 to 1916 to 1934, those are the origination dates of the four majors. Because again, like I said, it's been murky. And the other day I was reading a 1980 Washington Post, ironically, sports article, if you know what's going on there. And I was reading it, and here was the headline. August 1980, Nicklaus PGA Waltz lands him 19th major. There's also a tree at Oak Hill that has a plaque on it, also distinguishing that PGA championship that he won by 7 at the age of 40 was his 19th. And oh, by the way, in 1986, Ken Venturi on the CBS broadcast said that's 20. And then all of a sudden, at some point, it was 18. It's an interesting conversation to ask people when you thought something was distinguished as one thing or the other. That's why I'm not saying it can't. But one thing, unequivocally, that if it ever is, cannot be, is the idea of retroactively giving major championship victories to the ones who've won it formally. That cannot happen because, look, and that can of worms, you could be fishing with that for a long, long time. Let me just start with the idea that, okay, so if retroactively we're going to do that, then are we gonna suddenly put Jack at blackjack? Because he won 3 of them. So now all of a sudden, hey, Jack, blackjack for you, you're at 21 now. And Tiger would still be behind because he's got those 2. And by the way, boy, that'd be a hell of a big Hall of Fame class if suddenly Steve Elkington, Lee Janzen, and Hal Sutton got theirs, because there's nobody alive or dead that is eligible for the World Golf Hall of Fame with 3 majors who's not in it. See what I'm talking about? And let me just make one last point about if it is or isn't, because currently it's not. And I'm not saying that it can't be. But Tiger Woods, I've always believed, and he's won it twice, I've always believed had an ambivalence toward it. And this may seem like really flimsy. Name me another event, and certainly not a major because you can't, that he ever showed up with a goatee. He didn't shave several times when he played in the Players. And you can say, well, that's pretty flimsy. Sunglasses as well. Okay, Gary, that's also flimsy. How about this? He hadn't played in the Players since 2019. And you can say, well, he's been hurt. Yes, he has. You know how many times he's played in the Masters, which is a month later than the Players, since he last played? And of course, he won the Masters in 2019. 4 times. He's played in the Masters 4 times since he last played in the Players. It's not a major. It's not. It's a great event. And let me say this about from what it is and what they have there. What they have is one of the most provocative, interesting, compelling stages in sports. Forget golf. They also have, I would argue, and it's helped and amplified by the fact that it's an annualized event at the same venue. They have the great crescendo with 16, 17, and 18, because a combination of drama and calamity and everything else in between, golf tragedy, as we've seen on occasion, particularly at the 17th hole, nobody can match the crescendo. And additionally, to their great credit, the footprint, the way that they get people around, the hospitality build out without making it seem like it's just that. All of it is spectacular and awesome, but it's not right now. It's just a question of how do you force feed something? But here's the problem for people who want to push back on it. You now have somebody feeding the food who's very effective at getting, little people, and I'm not saying you're little people, but when babies get force fed something, what do? Spit it out. How do you market your way into a major? That commercial was marketing for a major, and it was not accidental. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, Brendon Porath will join me from Fried Egg. A lot of fried egg today. And then Kevin von Valkenburg as well. Great to have you with us, Golf Channel, and also Sirius XM Channel 92. It is good to be here on a Tuesday live. We're back right after this. Welcome back on a Tuesday, live on Golf Channel and PGA Tour Radio, Channel 92 on Sirius XM. This segment brought to you by Peter Millar. And this little winsome hybrid cardigan. You're going, that's not a cardigan. It's not your granddaddy's cardigan. This full zip, fabric sleeves, insulated body. It was my go-to gift that I sent to several friends who hosted me throughout last year. Perfect weight. It's such a great piece. All of it. Everything you would ever need is at Peter Millar, all the retail stores, and of course at petermillar.com. All right, joining me now, he needs a Winsome full zip hybrid because he's in Chicago, but I know they've got their own apparel deals. They got a lot of deals. They're going to play an alternate music festival, I think, on Thursday night somewhere in Illinois. He is from Fried Egg Golf. He, of course, is Brendon Porath, getting up early, an hour earlier for me. How you doing?
I'm great. I'm great, Gary. Thanks for having me. I'm coming to you from the middle of Wrigleyville here. So it's an odd time to be in Wrigleyville. The Airbnb was a good price in February in Wrigleyville compared to June, if you can believe it or not.
That is one of these, there's a handful of places, not just the ballpark, all of it is one of the great places. It's actually probably cool to be there this time of the year, even though it's, I'm sure, frigid. All right, plenty to get to with you. I'm curious about you when it comes to players who have young pedigree and then they pop, and then how you do the assessment of where you think they sit in the food chain. So when it comes to Goddard, is he a stick and stay guy? Do you think that he is now, his world rankings suggest he is absolutely one of the guys? Is he one of the guys?
It appears that way to me, but as you outlined, this is obviously a fraught exercise, right?
Yes.
And you can quickly become one of those dime store hot take artists if you start declaratively saying that you were talking about in the prior segment, declaratively saying what these young guys will be. I think, Nick Dunlap might be an example of this, right? Obviously, incredibly talented, remains incredibly talented, just struggling with one very specific area with the driver. But he wins as an amateur, and all of a sudden, what are the projections? What are we supposed to think? I think with Goddard, he is now number 5 in the world, which is an incredibly lofty perch. He's going to go to the Masters, a unique situation. He's going to play his first Masters with 4 PGA Tour wins at a minimum under his belt that he can add to it, certainly in intervening months. It's a very unique situation. I think he's a stick and stay guy. It's obviously tough to gauge, but based on what I've seen, look, he stared down Rory McIlroy in the final group at the Scottish Open, right? He stared down Hideki Matsuyama, major championship winner, a bona fide star for a decade or so on the PGA Tour this past week. Made a birdie, took it out of his hands, didn't even give him a chance to make the miracle par save in the playoff hole. And one thing that really impresses me about Goddard are not just those players he's beaten, it's where he's done it, right? He's considered this brawny New Jersey kid who hits it 350 yards. He won at Sony Open. He won at Sony Open by changing trajectories a ton off the tee, right? With the driver, right? It was windy there at the Sony Open. He would hit the low ball that was 50 feet off the air. Then he'd go wail away and come out of his shoes when he was downwind. So I think he has a skill. It's not who he's beaten. It's where he's won. Phoenix is by PGA Tour standards, an elite ball striking test. You have to play well in all 4 phases of the game there to contend. He struggled with his putter, but was so good everywhere else to win. So I think winning at Scottish against Rory, winning in windy conditions, having to change ball flights the way he did, winning at Phoenix, and being able to get across the line is a skill too. There's plenty of young guys who could rack up a ton of money in FedEx Cup points, finishing top 7, 8, 9. He's getting across the line. So for me, what I've seen indicates he's more of a stick and stay guy than a flash in the pan who gets hot for 4 weeks at a time.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brendon. The other thing is he's got an aesthetic. He's brawny. And like you said, there's artistry to the way that he executes shots, which I think it engages people. Scottie, to me, there's something about his doggedness that is. Whereas if you come in from playing a round of golf and you walk in the grill room and you ask, like, okay, where is he, or what did he shoot, or did he win? You're also not adding, okay, and I need to see the hero shot. There's probably not necessarily going to be that, but I think his doggedness of the persistence of always being there has people leaning forward. Does that help?
I think the close golf watchers, right, the PGA Tour super fans, the ones who are closely monitoring him week to week, I think it's maybe his most endearing quality. And I think that will then trickle out to the more casual fan. I think, quite frankly, among his most impressive feats last year was winning the CJ Cup Byron Nelson at TPC Craig Ranch by whatever it was, 7, 8 shots, a venue designed to bunch up where everybody can shoot, these rounds and get into the 20 under. He dominated. I think another, sign of that, affirmation of that doggedness you talk about, was winning the American Express right out of the gate this year. a lot of the top players, right, they show up for the majors. They show up when the stakes are highest. I think for him, and he's articulated this brilliantly in recent years, like, I approach every event the same way. I show up to win. I do my process, and this is why I'm here. It's not to get some reps or to collect an appearance fee or whatever it may be. It is to win, and it doesn't matter if it's the Masters or the CJ Cup, and that hometown event that resonated with him. And I think we saw it again this past week, where Thursday night, it's looking like it's going to be a cut sweat on Friday afternoon. Is he going to miss his first cut since, in 3 or 4, a couple of years now, we're going to miss his first cut. And now he's a shot out of the playoff. He goes in and comes right back, gets into the 30s. Then he moves up the leaderboard on Saturday. And then he ends up Sunday afternoon playing the final 9 with a chance to at least get in a playoff and maybe win it. So I do think, for me, obviously it's the brilliance on the biggest stages. It's the shot making, it's the consistency. But I do think his persistence and his sort of mindset, taking on everything relative to other stars, is one of his most endearing qualities.
So he's at 17 straight top 10s. And so now we're invoking the names of the likes of Billy Casper. And you're going, oh my God, that was 60 years ago. And in addition to inside those 17 straight top 10s, 14 of them were top 5s, in addition to a bushel full of wins. So it's not like, well, yeah, it's 17 straight, but he's only won twice. No, he wins a lot as well. So if he goes back to the Players, which was the last non-top 10 start, and this streak has continued, and it continues through that. Let's say it's another win or 2 along the way. Assess that achievement.
I think in the modern PGA Tour, now we know there are some signature events where the fields are not as large.
Yes.
I think in the modern PGA Tour, it's, this is a different era where winning is harder, where making cuts can be more challenging, where placing top 10 is certainly, it's much more crowded and difficult to do, given some of the venues they play, given the optimized sort of, I don't want to say robots, but there is a lot of duplicativeness coming out where younger players can immediately drop right in and have some measure of success at certain places and certain venues. So for me, it's among his most impressive achievements if he can continue just showing up and it's a top 10. It's a top 10. And that's a variety of venues, a variety of stakes, a variety of purses and fields. For me, it's among the more impressive things he's pulling off during this streak, and a streak that could see him win the career slam in a compact 4 years here. And if we look at the year right now, it feels almost more likely than not that he will complete the career slam within the next year or 2.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. So first signature event of the year this week, and these mechanisms that are in place, these programs that are sponsored, Next 10, Swing 5. And I'm just curious for you, are those things enough, whether it be trendy in terms of your trend line with Swing 5 or Next 10 with a longer, more extended window toward the latter part of the year? Are those dynamics enough to add to these events, or would you alter it or add certain triggers that would not only swell the field, but also give starts with merit?
I think it's a great idea in theory. I think it's an exceptional sort of mechanism that they've set up. I do think for the benefit of the event, the benefit of the field size could be a little larger. It could be pushing that sort of that golden number that the Masters shoots for, somewhere in the upper 80s, the low 90s of field size. PGA Tour, typically these signature events are typically slotting in the low 70s to high 70s, depending on the event. I do think you could add another 10 players or so. The mechanism for me is brilliant. Of course, a continued tension right now on the PGA Tour are the stars versus the rank and file, and these are pathways to prove that it can be done. Eric Cole a few years ago was on the minor league golf tour. All of a sudden, he's playing his way into signature events. Ben Griffin doing similarly last year. Chris Gotterup obviously is flashing right now and has since last summer. And the names you just showed, Pearson Coody is a young super talent. It just racks up, and birdie average is among the best on the PGA Tour. Someone you want to have access to these elite events and has played well enough this year to do that. So I think it has set up. I want to say there's an appeasement factor here for some of the rank and file members of these are pathways to get into the richest, most exclusive events. But I do think they could bump it up a few, 5, 6, 7 more spots. And that also then, all that does is benefit the preceding events, right? It's the Pebble Beach lifting up the 2 events, right? Creating more stakes, more value, more games within the game at earlier events. The one whole, I think, that and sort of scarlet letter of these fields is the sponsor exemption. I think if you want to make these a purely merit-based signature elite event, then this is a long-standing debate about on the PGA Tour of giving out sometimes circus sponsor exemptions. These are not that, but they are sort of a black mark against building this completely merit-based elite field.
The sponsor exemption thing is among a handful of things that I would do. It's not necessarily altering what currently exists, because I agree with you. And the beneficiaries of this are the events preceding it, especially storylines. And if you got a runaway winner and you can follow that, and whether it be the weekend or the final day, look, it's an enormous amount of money that these companies are putting into these events. If you take a sponsor exemption, you're only permitted to get one over the course of a calendar year. You can't just be handed all these. So one, that's it for you if that is what you need to get in. The other thing I would do is that anybody who wins on the PGA Tour, I don't care what the event is, should be greenlit for 2 starts. You can't talk about how hard it is to win a PGA Tour event and then tell them, good work, keep working, now you'll get into our elite series. Anybody who wins a golf tournament should get 2 starts. The other thing that I would do, Brendon, is that the DP World Tour now has this alliance where you're providing cards to guys based on performance. Anybody who's number 1 in the Race to Dubai standings the week before a signature series event that isn't already otherwise exempt, I'd put them in one field. And then the final thing I would do, Brendon, with respect to like the weeks leading up to it, if you finish 2nd or 3rd alone in the event right before a signature series, you're in. That's a flyer. Put the guy in that, and now you're inching up that number to 84, 86, 88, whatever it is.
Do they have a chair for you on the Future Competitions Committee with Brian Rolab? It seems like you've thought about this in depth and have some exemptions already earmarked for these signature events. I follow everything you're saying. I mean, DP World Tour, current number one makes sense. Of course, the current number 1 might not be otherwise exempt in Patrick Reed, but I agree with you. It all makes sense. And the other thing about the sponsors exemptions, right? If you're some prominent player, and I won't name names, if you're some big name and you've earned that, what is to motivate, and you suspect these sponsor exemptions will be coming, what is to motivate you to play in the fall, motivate you to play the John Deere's, the American Express, right? That has that second effect of, well, maybe I don't need to show up for these other events that are should be lifted up by the possibility of playing into a signature event. So I agree with you. I do think there's room to, and you've thought about it, room to perk up these fields with some different pathways and get that field size more to the mid 80s, low 90s.
All right, we'll end with this, and it's not easy to condense this question and the conversation, and we'll have more because it's interesting. What was your initial reaction to the commercial spot by the PGA Tour promoting the players? And then subsequently, what was your reaction to Brandel's position?
I mean, my initial reaction was like, oh no, here we go again. Are we doing this again? I echo your sentiments in the opening segment. I think the Players' Championship has found a beautiful, wonderful lane here in recent 5-6 years. And I think they've done away with the sort of trying to impose the major status on everyone else. And there was on everyone else to decide. There was a statement they gave to Shane Ryan, writer for Golf Digest, said, "We know this is not for us to decide." Well, it sure seems like you're trying to decide it by saying March is going to be major, suggesting the players already know this is a major in that same statement. I would suggest that if you open that's maybe not a poll you want to conduct amongst the locker room. I mean, the players might not respond in kind. I don't know for a fact, but it would be certainly a diverse set of opinions on whether the Players Championship is a major. I don't. The Players is so wonderful. I can't wait to get down there next year. It has all the advantages of being at that venue, the same venue. They've dialed it in so perfectly. It's this great festival of golf. It's completely unique. I think in this day and age, declaring yourself a major is not possible. It's not 1937 and the Masters and Clifford Roberts, trying to set up the future structure of golf. It's just not possible. And doing only invites, I think, a cross-examination that maybe you don't want, and being placed under the microscope in a way that maybe you don't want. I think you can't market your way into a major. I thought Brandel, I know his position is well researched, as you suggested. It's probably earnestly held.
Earnestly.
I found it to be delusional, though. I just didn't agree with it. Not delusional is too strong a term. I just thought it was detached from the set of facts. I found it almost just dismissive of the other four, right? Putting it above the other four for me. But I totally follow his path, but of how he got there. I know he arrives at it genuinely, but I don't think you can call it standing above the other majors when it doesn't have Jon Rahm or it doesn't have Bryson DeChambeau. I know the back half of the field is stronger than a U.S. Open with qualifiers or PGA Championship with club pros. And that portion of the field is stronger. But to suggest it's a major when, Patrick Reed right now is not eligible. He's among the top 5-6 hottest players in the world. Bryson DeChambeau, Jon Rahm. The majors have those guys in their field. The Players does not. I think that's a pretty damning exhibit in the argument.
We will talk more about this, I'm sure. You and I both agree that the Tour couldn't have anybody. They couldn't identify anybody who they would want to support that position more than him, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, he's an advocate you want, right? He's a dogged advocate you want. And and he comes to it earnestly. I think you're right. And he's the one, you said it. There's nobody in golf media for sure. You said it in the opening segment that you would want taking your position, certainly in golf media right now. And I followed how he got there completely. For me, it was not something I was ready to comprehend. It's a stunning statement for me personally. I
look forward to this conversation, the questions being posed a couple weeks from now, and I will see you. I look forward to that. Thank you as always.
Thanks, Gary. Appreciate it.
Okay. There's Brendon Porath, Fried Egg. Another Fried Egg. Yes, Kevin von Valkenburg is going to join me next. His view on that question, but a lot of other stuff with him. One of the great writers in the game of golf, in sports. Back with him after this. Back in on a Tuesday on 5 Clubs, live on Golf Channel and PGA Tour Radio Channel 92 on Sirius XM. This segment brought to you by Century Insurance. That's their business, is business insurance. Evaluate yours with them. It is Century Insurance right by you. All right, we continue. Again, all of these folks that work for Fried Egg Golf do such a great job. He has moved over there. He's the head of content. He is Kevin von Valkenburg, who's an elite writer. And you got to be a great thinker to then produce it in the form of written word. Good morning. How you feeling? You are not in Chicago yet. I know you're headed there. How you doing?
I'm good. I feel like Porath's at the table here, so I'm coming in to play cleanup, Gary.
Yeah, I never kind of fashioned him as a leadoff man, but he laid down a very effective bunt. He is, and actually there was a poor throw to first, so he's standing on second. You'll drive him in. Let me start with you where I ended with him about this, the major status and the PGA Tour and the Players, because this thing has festered for a long, long time. And they threw a big piece of chum in the water at the end of last week. And now here we are. And I know you agree with him and me. Brandel is one of one. And the position he took is really driven what the reaction was, as opposed to everybody just literally stomping it down immediately. How do they, if they do this effectively, whether it's not about this year, just how do you market yourself or get yourself in a place that has historically a very murky timeline for the status of the four that exist?
Yeah, I think that what's clear is that the PGA Tour is decided to go on offense in every way that they can. And this is probably another example of that. It's not so much that maybe Brian Roleb thinks that it's actually going to become a major someday, but that talking about it is probably the best way to put your best foot forward and say, this is a premier event that we feel like it should be considered the best of the best.
Kevin, the other thing, kids ask this question, adults should do it more. Why? Like, why is the most effective question to me? Kids are not satisfied with why. When you give them the answer, they say, but why? But why? But why? I want to know why. And I actually think part of this has to do with, in terms of the PGA Tour is on offense. And I also think, and it's not passive aggressive, maybe it is, with the majors, their main actors go to these other four stages and produce a hell of a show. And it's like, what's in it for us? We build with our product. We are your shoulder programming to your stages. I think that's part of it. What do you think of that?
For sure. I mean, I think this goes back to the original point that Phil Mickelson, of all people, was really adamant about, which is that we're the talent. And why should we continue to support a way for you to make a ton of money without us benefiting from it? We should deserve a higher percentage of that stuff. And, history evolves on its own sort of timeline, right? It's hard to sort of say exactly why the Western Open stopped being a major and why the Masters did become a major. Why the PGA of America was able to sort of hold on to its prominence. I think it's not always an easy discussion for someone who's kind of like a keeper of the history of the game. And I think that that's what a lot of golf writers have to look at. And, how do we evaluate these sort of things? I think we're all sort of content with the fact that there's four majors. But I think when you have to step back and look at it objectively, you realize that these things are sort of an imaginary construct. Like, why did the Masters just get to sort of buy its way into history and invent itself as a major in 1934? Like, it wasn't a major for a long time in its sort of early stages because there was no such thing really. It was, the majors, what Bob Jones played for, were very different than what we play for now. So I think the why is kind of, it's a complicated question. It's kind of breaks down to the PGA Tour is essentially saying, we don't want to continue to sort of be the fifth shareholder in this whole deal. We want to be number one because we're the ones who are most effective at providing the talent.
Well, I hope somebody asks a two-time winner of the event, Rory, because it's his first start this week, and he's always going to get, he can't help himself, which is great, a thorough, righteous position virtually all the time. So with him starting his season, and with the Olympics in 28, we know that's a pelt that he wants. What would be the most compelling achievement for Rory McIlroy in 26?
I think it would be to win a U.S. Open or an Open Championship on a tough, hard-conditioned course. I think, he knows that he kind of got away with a rare U.S. Open, Congressional, where it was soft and he could sort of tear it up. I think it would really mean a lot to him to win a U.S. Open where it was, plus two or 3 under was kind of the winning score. He has played really well in a lot of U.S. Opens of late. He's turned himself into an incredibly good U.S. Open player, and that hasn't quite translated yet into a victory. And I think the same is probably true of the Open Championship. If you look back at when Rory was a dominant player in 2014, it was kind of, him going on a heater and then him sort of cooling off, and him going on a heater again and him cooling off. And overall, he has raised his floor tremendously. And I think just mentally, it would mean so much to him to prove, like, I know I can grind out a really difficult major and put that on my shelf too.
Yeah, you're right about the idea of, 10, 12 years ago, it was heaters. And now I think people think he ebbs more than he actually does. He really doesn't. I think part of that is because the guy who's the best player in the world just flows. And so with Scheffler, I asked Brendon about, what's compelling, and I think his just dogged determination is just like, holy cow, really? If you were going to write a feature about him right now, what would the angle be?
I think one of the most interesting questions when it comes to Scottie is he doesn't have that, outward maniacal, like I live and breathe this to the death every single minute that I'm thinking about my life. It's about golf. I'm putting off, various things, whether, like the Kobe Bryant mentality, the Tiger Woods mentality. He has a much more balanced kind of view of things. It reminds me more of Jack Nicklaus. Like, hey, I'm never going to play more than 2 weeks in a row. I'm never going to be away from my kids very long. I'm going to bring my family along. I'm going to have, my son's caddy for me when they get old enough. And I'm going to be able to turn this thing off when I walk away from it. And I'm going to sort of think about what, things are more important to me than golf in this life. And can a person who approaches a sport that way be the all-time greatest player? I think it would be a really interesting, compelling argument to think of, like, will Scottie be able to have more balance and more success over the long term because he approaches this like Jack Nicklaus? And I think that's part of the reason why I found his comments at the Open last year just so compelling, because it's so rare for a truly great athlete to have enough self-awareness to step outside himself and say, you know what, this whole stuff is kind of silly. Like, it's just professional sports. It means nothing in the greater scheme of things, while at the same time having the motivation to push themselves so far to where they're truly great at the sport. I think that's an interesting conflict.
Last thing, I'm just curious, with the Players a couple weeks away, Tiger hadn't played the event in 2019, but now he's got this front-facing position with the PGA Tour. When do you think he'll be there? And do you think that he is now, with respect to Brian Rolap, that he will be the one, whether it be right after or just persistently the guy who is beating the drum and explaining about new structure, new schedule, all that? Do you think that audibly will be his biggest impact on the game this year?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's a really interesting question, is what role Tiger can play going forward. I mean, do you really want a PGA Tour where a 51-year-old, a 52-year-old is sort of out front and center? I think that if we're being honest with ourselves, that Tiger's kind of lost a little bit of the juice and the buzz that he once had over the general public. If it was Tiger of 20 years ago, I think TGL would be kind of appointment television, and it would be something that people were tuning in just to get any kind of glimpse of him, because it was so rare to be able to get a window into his normal life. And I don't know that that's true anymore. And so I think if you're thinking about an entertainment product, golf being an entertainment product, do you want like the equivalent of Bruce Springsteen, an all-time great, maybe for some people the truly the great person, but eventually, like, you have to be able to produce newer and younger stars to make another generation get hooked on your product. And so Tiger has a lot of wisdom. Tiger has a lot of gravitas. Whether he has the sort of juice to be the person front and center anymore, I don't know that that's the best business strategy.
Thank you. I look forward to doing this more. Travel safe to Chicago. Appreciate it very much.
Anytime, Gary.
All right, there's Kevin von Valkenburg. Those were winning words presented by Century Insurance. We come back, wrap it up on a Tuesday right after this. Back in on this Tuesday. This segment is brought to you by Peter Millar. I'm telling you, this is a hybrid cardigan. You're saying, no, it isn't. Yes, it is, because only Peter Millar could create an amazing little piece like this, little insulated body, fabric sleeves. Everything is at Peter Millar and petermillar.com. The what if game, it's fun. Yeah, it's frivolous at times, but it is fun. With respect to the major conversation, not so much that, but Augusta National wanted the U.S. Open before there was an Augusta National invitation, which was 1934. So in 1933, the USGA went to Augusta National and was there for a couple of days. Prescott Bush was the head of the championship committee for the USGA. You wonder how hard it is to say no to Bobby Jones? Bobby Jones in 1933 was a deity. And they said no. They said no because in terms of when the championship would have to be played, it would have been earlier than when their traditional date was in June. So they passed. They passed on it. So the Augusta National Invitation was started modestly in 1934. But what if they took a flyer and they did what most people likely did when they had a conversation, and if that conversation included an ask from Robert Tyre Jones Jr.? But they said no. What if they said yes? I have no idea. But it is, it's one of those things where why this conversation is, it's not tedious. I think it's useful. It can be, you can gather information, you can gain context, you can get better historical perspective because the line is murky. There's no doubt about it. So this will continue, and I can promise you, Players Week. And one last thing. I asked this of Jay Monahan a couple of years ago. Do you like when people refer to this as a fifth major? And he looked at me like, what do you mean? It's either a major or it isn't. It is a flat line. It's a line item. There's no second or fourth. It either is or it isn't. And currently, it isn't. Have a great Tuesday. Tomorrow, 9:30 with Justin Rose. See you then.